This is R2D Tech, and we're back again with another video today, this time about the Asus ROG Zephyrus Duo 15, so stay tuned. So the Zephyrus Duo 15 is kind of the cousin to the ZenBook Duo 15, which came out last year. They have the same kind of outstanding feature, which is the secondary display on the keyboard deck. And you could say that it's kind of been improved this year because it actually lifts up, which is a pretty exciting and unique feature. So let's see if the laptop is actually any good. So let's talk about the design first. And for a gaming laptop, I'd say it had a relatively understated and professional look. There are no kind of flashy RGB lights on the outside, so you could probably make it work in an office environment if you really wanted it to. Now, opening up the laptop, the first thing you're going to see is probably the primary display. Now, there are pretty relatively thin bezels on the outside, which is good to see, although they're not the thinnest. And there are two display options to choose from, either a 4K 60Hz panel or a 300Hz 1080p panel. Now, if you're a gamer, then you should probably go for the 300Hz panel. However, that is kind of overkill. I don't think you're ever going to reach 300Hz in a game, so it is kind of overkill. If you're a content creator, you might want to go for the 4K panel just because it is a little bit more color accurate. However, the 1080p panel should work fine as well. Both displays do reach 400 nits, which I think is sufficiently bright to work outdoors. And unfortunately, none of the primary display options are touchscreen. So if you do want a touchscreen primary display, then you should probably look elsewhere. Now moving on to the secondary display, which is probably the outstanding feature of this laptop. When you open up the laptop, the secondary display does lift up off the keyboard deck, which is a really unique feature. However, I'm always quite worried about having extra moving parts in a laptop just because of the durability. However, it does seem like quite a sturdy design, which is kind of reassuring. There's no kind of flex or wobble to the secondary display, which is really good. You can also do basically anything you want to do on the primary display on the secondary display, as long as you don't mind having a relatively squashed view of it. The secondary display is also a touchscreen and has a resolution of 3840 by 1100 pixels, so there is also a really high resolution there. I imagine the secondary display could be really useful when video editing or even streaming while you're gaming. One of the downsides of having that secondary display is that the keyboard and trackpad have to be moved down, which is really annoying. Now the keyboard is on the left and the trackpad is quite a small trackpad and it's just right of the keyboard. Now I imagine if you're going to be using this for a long time, then you will get used to the keyboard and having to type just to the left of the trackpad. However, at first it was a little bit uncomfortable and the trackpad was also a little bit small for my liking. However, it is really smooth and accurate, so that's kind of an upside. Now running through some of the internals on this laptop, for the processor you can either choose from a Core i9-10980HK processor, which is an 8-core processor, or a Core i7-10875H processor, which is a 6-core processor. For the graphics cards, you have two options, either the GeForce RTX 2080 Super Max Q or the GeForce RTX 2070 Super Max Q. Then for RAM and storage, you can go all the way up to 48 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of SSD storage. Finally, for the battery, you do get a 90 watt hour battery. However, we'll talk about the battery life later. Moving on to the ports you get on this laptop. Firstly, you're getting one USB-C port with a Thunderbolt 3, three USB-A ports, one HDMI port, one microphone in port, one microphone in/headphone out jack, and finally the power socket. Now, for charging the laptop, you can either charge it through the power socket with 240 watts or through the USB-C port, which does also support power delivery with 65 watts. So that's pretty impressive. So let's talk about the battery life on this laptop, and with that pretty massive 90 watt hour battery, you would expect to get a decent battery life. However, you're only going to be averaging around 5 hours with normal use, and obviously that will decrease if you're playing games or video editing or using the graphics cards in any way. That's probably because it's powering both displays, both the primary and secondary display, so you're definitely going to see decreased battery life compared to other laptops with similar sized batteries. So that's kind of a downside of having that secondary display as well. So the Zephyrus Duo 15 is beginning to look like a really great laptop with probably the best specs you could ask for, the really unique secondary display, and it's also really thin and light, coming in at 2.4 kilograms, which is quite light considering the specs you get. There are some drawbacks, however. For example, it does get pretty hot even when you're not using the laptop for gaming or video editing, and you will hear the fan spinning up quite loud. There's also no webcam, which is pretty important considering the current circumstances. It is also really pricey. You're going to be paying somewhere between £3,000 and £4,000 or dollars depending on where you are. So there is really no cheap option with this laptop. There are definitely going to be cheaper laptops for the specs out there, and there are definitely going to be better laptops for either gaming or video editing. If you think that you can make use of all the features, including that secondary display, and you definitely can afford it, then it is a really great laptop with a really unique design. However, I wouldn't recommend it for most people. That's it from this video. If you liked it, please press the thumbs up button. If you loved it, please consider subscribing.